Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of State Champs eSports Atari 2600 edition. Today we are going to be mixing things up a little bit. Normally we focus on one game. But today we're going to be playing several of the Star Wars games for the 2600. But before we get started on that, let me just tell you a little bit about our sponsors. First up is, of course, Lawrence Technological University. You can find out more about that great university that's located in Southfield, Michigan on their website, which is ltu.edu. We've also got Army, Michigan. And they've got a great, amongst many things, they've got a great eSports team. So visit the U.S. Army Twitch channel, U.S. Army eSports Twitch channel. And then, of course, we've got Hungry Howie's Pizza, famous for flavor. That is their saying, and they were, after all, the company that invented flavor crust, so they would know a thing or two about flavor. My name is Denver, and right now we've got Star Wars Empire Strikes Back. This was the first Atari game made, or I should say the first Star Wars game made for the Atari 2600. It came out in 1982, obviously as a tie-in to the movie, the classic movie, maybe one of the best ever movies, definitely probably the best sequel ever made. I'll fight you on that if you think otherwise. Now, the game itself, is it one of the best ever games? No, definitely not. But it's fun. I do remember briefly playing this game at the time growing up in the early 80s. I don't believe it was a game that I ever owned or borrowed from a friend. It was, as I mentioned, a game that I did play. I do have memories of it. It's essentially Defender with AT-AT walkers or AT-AT walkers, depending on what kind of terminology is used. My friends and I, we call them AT-ATs. Essentially, you just got to shoot the AT-ATs while dodging their cannon fire. And if you notice, there are these little blinking lights every once in a while that will light up. If you shoot those, you will destroy the AT-AT. I have yet to do that while I'm playing here. Now, for those of you who don't know, at the time, Parker Brothers had the license to produce Star Wars video games. Parker Brothers had a big hit with Frogger, the port of Frogger anyway, and that kind of put them on the map as far as games went. That was a huge seller. I believe they did a couple million cartridges, which definitely puts that up in the top range of Atari 2600 games. Now, Empire Strikes Back was not nearly as big of a seller. For one, it's just not as good of a game. And two, Frogger was a huge arcade game. And so a lot of the big Atari games, and I'll speak for myself in particular, a lot of the big Atari games were ports from popular arcade games. Notoriously, Pac-Man is the biggest selling Atari cartridge of all time, even though it's considered to be one of the worst Atari games ever made. Just for context, Pac-Man sold over 7 million, maybe 7.5 million cartridges, and Empire Strikes Back sold about 1 million cartridges, maybe just over a little bit over 1 million. Is that laser blast? Looks like it came out of his butt. Now, the reason I mentioned up at the top of the show was we were going to break format a little bit, because these Star Wars games were notoriously known as being mixed to bad, and sales were not great for the Star Wars games from Parker Brothers. Empire Strikes Back was probably the best game that was made as far as Star Wars Atari 2600 games, and it was the biggest seller. So, as you can see, it's a pretty monotonous game in the sense that you're literally just trying to blow up these AT-ATs. There's not much else to this game. As a matter of fact, you cannot win this game. The AT-ATs will eventually destroy all of your ships, as what's happening here with me tonight. Or they will get to the rebel base on Hoth and destroy the base. So either way, you cannot win. So a bit of a downer. It is a challenging game in the sense that it's hard to defeat all of these AT-ATs, but it's fairly repetitive. Now, there was a gameplay, and I used this a lot for Defender, which is literally just kind of going as fast as you can, back and forth, and shooting in the hopes that you'll avoid the AT-AT cannon fire while still able to put enough shots on them. And at some point, your ship is supposed to flash, and you'll have the force, meaning you cannot be destroyed by AT-AT cannon blast. I'm not sure if that's like a point system. I just haven't gotten to enough points in the game yet. But you can see that is... Oh, it looks like I'm flashing. Look at that. Speak of the devil. So I cannot, in theory, be destroyed. But flashing is over. So you can see, not a lot of variation in the game. I wouldn't say it's a lot of fun. I mean, there is some pleasure in just kind of mindlessly blasting these AT-ATs, but it gets old pretty quick. So if I had to grade it, I'd give it a C+. Maybe a C. Definitely better than some of the games that I've played. Gets points for including the Star Wars theme song at the beginning. It'd be nice if it played a little bit during the game itself. So as you can see, there's a bunch of different strategies. Kind of the strategy I'm taking now is shoot a few, instead of just plowing straight through. Shoot a few times, move on. Instead of trying to focus on just one AT-AT walker at a time. So that's it for the Empire Strikes Back game. We are going to take a quick little detour, and the next game that came out was Star Wars Jedi Arena. Now this came out the following year in 1983. It was not necessarily based on any particular game. There was a scene in the original Star Wars where Luke is getting trained and he's getting zapped by this little floating ball. And then Obi-Wan Kenobi and the Millennium Falcon, or Millennium Falcon, depending on how you pronounce it. So you are using this lightsaber, and you are trying to protect. You've got a little shield in front of you, and you are trying to protect it from being destroyed by a little training ball, or whatever the hell you want to call it. And it's really, as you can see, it's intended for a 2-player. Now I am playing single player, obviously. So, like with the game Freeway, when we talked about that the other day, whenever you're playing another person, it tends to take the fun factor up a little bit, especially if the person you're playing with is particularly competitive. It makes it a little bit more fun, as opposed to just playing the computer. Now again, this game kind of suffers from the same fate that Empire Strikes Back has, where you're really just doing the same thing over and over again. And unlike a lot of other Atari games where you're also doing kind of the same thing over and over again, there's not enough variety and complexity to really make it super fun, at least on a 1-player basis. So I would say that this comes a little bit under the Empire. Okay, now you see he decimated my field, my little shield there, and was able to zap me, and then it's over. Now they've switched it to the top, I guess, to make it a little bit more interesting. I suppose it'll add a little variety to the game here. The other thing that's frustrating about this game is that there's no offense. You're literally just trying to block your shield. So it would be nice to maybe be able to fight back somehow. Now both of these games, Empire Strikes Back and Jedi Arena, were created by Rex Bradford. I guess since Empire Strikes Back had some level of success, they gave Rex the go-ahead to produce Jedi Arena, which did not do nearly as well as Empire Strikes Back. And, you know, who can blame him? It didn't really have a good movie tie-in. And besides being, you know, one of the most minor of moments in Star Wars, it's not like they took one great moment from Star Wars and made a game out of it. I mean, they took like a relatively early scene from the movie that's not very dramatic. I think it is the first time that Luke really uses the lightsaber in any real way besides just kind of holding it and waving it around. But, you know, this is it, folks. Not all that great either. And this also received mixed to poor reviews. So, whereas Empire was okay financially and critically, Jedi Arena did not fare well at all. Now, in that same year, you had another game from our folks over at Parker Brothers, and this was a tie-in to Return of the Jedi. This is called the Starb Battle, and as you can see, you're in the Millennium Falcon, and you got to shoot these TIE fighters. And basically what you're doing is you're waiting for an opening in this shield above you. And as you can see in the sky above the shield, or out in space above the shield, is the newly rebuilt... Oh! Crashed into the shield. Got a little bit too high up. So what you're supposed to do is wait for an opening. Ooh, and watch out for the laser blast. You're supposed to wait for an opening in that shield. Oh, darn it. To be able to fly up into the next stage. So, can't even get past the opening round here, folks. Now, this game I do not ever remember playing as a child, and you know, this is from somebody who is a major mega Star Wars fan, so it just shows you the lack of kind of enthusiasm and interest. I mean, Star Wars is by far my favorite movie. I mean, all of them. And so, there we go. See how the little opening in the shield, and I was able to fly through it. So now what you have to do is, now you're close to the newly built Death Star. And I believe... No, don't shoot those. So you're kind of doing more of the same, where you're shooting these ships. Oop, and avoiding lasers. Oops. So again, not a great game, but okay, you can see. Well, shoot, I hung around too close. Gotta try to blow up the Death Star there without getting blown up yourself. Whoa, that came out of nowhere. Shoot. Alright, I'm back to opening stage here. So I will say this is better in the sense that at least there's a little bit of variety. I mean, not much, because essentially you're still kind of doing the same thing, you just have a slightly different background. But here you've got the Death Star that you can try to take out, all the while trying to avoid cannon blasts and X-Wing fighters and other ships. But again, overall, is this a great game? No, not by a long shot. I would say maybe, I was going to say maybe worse than Empire, but only in the sense that it's not much fun either. But I do say at least the graphics, there's a little bit of variety in the gameplay and graphics. Definitely better, for sure better than Jedi Arena, without a doubt. Hands down, no comparison. Still, not a game that I owned, not a game that I even really played that much. So you can kind of see that Parker Brothers is waffling a bit. I'm assuming they paid a ton of money for the Star Wars license and just really not seeing much of a return here. Okay, there's my opening. Oh, shoot. Darn it. Normally it doesn't take me that long. I did a little test run before we started streaming here, and I was doing a lot better at that opening stage. Again, a little Star Wars music would help this game quite a bit. It's amazing what we talked about it in the Frogger episode. I walked right into that one, or flew into that one. Well, we talked about in the Frogger episode how there was some great folk Americana type music, and that really does go a long way in making these games a lot more enjoyable. Alright, well, I think we've all about had enough of good old Death Star Battle from 1983. Let's take a brief pause and switch over to perhaps the best of the Star Wars games. There's the theme that we know and love. Now, Star Wars, the arcade game, also came out in 1983, so let's think about it, folks. That's 3 games in 1 year. Now, the object of this game, as you can see, is to shoot not only the TIE fighters, but their cannon blasts. And part of the success of this game is that it was based on a fairly successful arcade game, actually one that I really enjoyed playing. Obviously, the graphics and gameplay for that are much better than what we've got here, but nonetheless, this gets you pretty close to that. It's conceptually the same. Now it looks like we are on the surface of the Death Star. We've got to avoid the various cannons. Okay, now we got to the good part. Here's the trench run. So you got to avoid the cannon blasts, and then you've also got to be ready for the opening, where you got to shoot into the opening to blow up the Death Star. Now, the real problem with this part of the game is that, oh, okay, there we go. I did it. Blew up the Death Star. I was going to say the real problem with the trench run portion of the game is that there's not a lot to do. As long as you lay low, you can kind of fly right underneath all the cannon blasts. So really, the trench run, you're just basically looking for that opening shoot it as soon as you see it. The arcade version is a little bit more complicated. So, as you can see, Parker Brothers finally got a decent arcade game. Part of it is the variety of gameplay. You got 3 different levels to compete in, even though you're essentially doing the same thing. Just visually, you've got a little variety. And they do mix it up. You've got the TIE Fighter in the first level, and then you've got these obstacles, these cannons that you have to kind of navigate. Now there's the shield, defense shield, so you don't want to get too high or too low. So this is definitely a lot more challenging. Okay, didn't do so well there. But that's essentially it for Star Wars the arcade game. You're just repeating those same 3 levels. Each level gets a little bit more difficult and challenging. This was probably the best received and reviewed Star Wars game, but still was not able to top Empire Strikes Back, at least for the Atari 2600. I think after Jedi Arena and the Return of the Jedi Death Star Battle, people probably felt a little burned or jaded and could care less about getting another. Think about it, this would have been the 3rd Star Wars game of 1983 that they would be asked to purchase, and once again, I did not own any of these Star Wars games, so as a diehard Star Wars fan, you know they gotta be bad. But I don't want to brag too much on this game, because this is for sure the best of the bunch. I just want to blow up the Death Star one more time. Oh, and there we go. We did it. Easy peasy. Alright, now there is one more Star Wars game for the Atari 2600. I'm going to just jump over to the Ewok Adventure. So this was, the full title is Return of the Jedi Ewok Adventure. What is interesting about this game is that it never was released. Parker Brothers made the game, and had it all ready to go, and when the marketing team, so the story goes, when the marketing team played the game, they were so confused by the gameplay and just how difficult that it was, they decided, you know what, we are not going to release this game. Now think about it, this was also slated for 1983. So this would have been the 4th game in 1 year. Now I will say, what makes this game interesting, at least one of the things in my mind, is that you can navigate in all directions. It's a bit of a free roaming game. So you can go forward, you can go sideways. Now they will give you directional arrows as far as which screen you should be on. You're trying to get to, I believe, the shield generator and blow it up and destroy it, which is, I think, what just happened there. So this game is definitely a little bit ahead of its time, because as we know, free roaming games are... Oop, it looks like I crashed into that. Now, if you can't tell by the graphics, because I know they're pretty basic, you are an Ewok on one of their hang gliders flying around, and you can go up and down, and that's all based on how close the shadow is. And you can, if you see a speeder bike, as I just did, you can hop on that and expedite your journey to the shield generator. Oops, there we go. And there's the shield generator, and let's destroy little Ewok buddies. Alright. Now apparently there was one cartridge made, and that cartridge was given to the designer of the game, and he gave that to one of his friend's kids, who years later sold the cartridge for $1,600. Now you might think, wow, that's a lot, but relatively speaking, that's a steal. If you want to find out a little bit about the highest selling cartridge of all time, go check out the Air Raid episode. That is a game that had very limited, I think only a couple hundred cartridges made, and it was made by a company who had only made that game. That was their one and only game. And to top it off, it had this crazy blue handle on top of the blue cartridge, and that sold for almost $34,000, if you can believe it or not. So $1,600, that's a steal in my book. But all right, well, that's the let's see, there was Empire Strikes Back, Jedi Arena, Return of the Jedi, Death Star Battle, Star Wars the arcade game, the port, and then Return of the Jedi Ewok Adventure. So there's the 5 games that were made for the Atari 2600, and I hope you enjoyed. If you're a Star Wars geek like myself, this was a lot of fun, even though the games weren't necessarily fun. Before I go, let me thank Lawrence Technological University, Hungry Howie's Pizza, and Army, Michigan. This has been Denver from State Champs eSports. We'll see you tomorrow.